At the start of last year, I made a video talking about Cry of Fear, a free Half-Life mod where you played as a sad little Swedish man trying to find his way home to watch the next PewDiePie Amnesia video. 2012 was a different time. That video did alright and sent me into a rabbit hole of trying free mods for games. I'm not talking about mods that actually make a game fun, more total conversion mods. Mods that change the entire game so it's something completely different. And this mod was suggested non-stop in the comment section of my videos, and I'm happy that you all suggested it, because in some ways, it even surpasses Cry of Fear. Now, I want to throw a scenario at you. Imagine the 70s, terrifying time where TikTok didn't exist and people actually had to read things. And when I say read, I'm talking about a book. Tweets don't count, okay? Shut up. Although, I have recently came back to that hell site, if you want to follow me. Imagine you're a Coast Guard and you get a signal for a ship that's been lost at sea and you go to mount a rescue. But you yourself sustain heavy damage in a storm and get lost. You lie on the deck of your boat hoping that you're rescued, but no help ever comes. But when you wake up, you've arrived at an island. From the outside, it looks hostile and inhospitable, with these tall concrete structures rising out of the earth. You manage to fix most of the boat's damage once you're on shore, but you keep getting a strange radio signal. Someone obviously wants your help. But it's also very obvious
that things are very, very wrong on this island.
The voice on the radio also says YouTube has a bug that randomly unsubscribes people. So make sure that you're subscribed. It's free and you can always change your mind. Also, this video is pretty long, especially compared to the constant dopamine hit of YouTube Shorts. So now I have a second channel where I upload daily content, usually taken from my Twitch. Link for that down in the description. I've also got a Discord server. You can join that, although you probably shouldn't. Also, because it's the popular thing to do, I now have a podcast with Dolan Dark, Nerd City, and Colossal is Crazy. 90% of it is just making fun of me, but, you know, they're all old. They'll die soon. Who cares? Link for that down in the description. Now, this mod is called Total Chaos. It looks pretty similar to Cry of Fear, but I'm not joking when I say this is a mod for Doom 2. The same Doom that has the funny pixel sprite enemies everywhere. If you don't believe me, just whip open the console commands and spawn any Doom 2 asset of your choosing. The game was made by Wadaholic. He lives in New Zealand, bro, so I think he talks like this and says fish and chips a lot. Total Chaos is based on the GZ Doom engine, a source port that features cool things that the original Doom couldn't do, like lighting effects, model support, and 3D slope floors. Finally, no more stairs, wheelchair access in video games. Now, this is a project that Wadaholic has been working on for basically 9 years, and only last year was the project completely finished and wrapped up.
Can I go home now?
The original videos for this mod, it looks like a found footage film if the cameraman was the Doom guy. This game shares a lot of similarities to Cry of Fear. Both have limited resources, inventory management, and both have spooky monsters. But Total Chaos's world is a lot grimier and darker. In Cry of Fear, you were in Stockholm for most of the game, and even though everyone had seemingly vanished, when you were on the streets, things look kind of normal. You could at least imagine people living here. But in Total Chaos, the game is set on Fort Oasis, a mining colony that's been abandoned for decades, so you can see the decay that's set in. The underground has nature trying to reclaim it, with vines and roots growing through the walls. And the surface looks like Birmingham on a good day. To any non-UK viewers, Birmingham is the city that has the funny Xbox 360 shouty man.
I fucking love steroids! I love them! I fucking eat them!
Who is this? Hello.
Where Total Chaos and Cry of Fear differentiate a lot is the protagonist in this game is a complete noob. He doesn't say anything directly and has no real personality. And for that reason, there's no cutscenes in the game because it'd be pointless. The only real character in this game are the notes you find of people that used to live on Fort Oasis and that voice that is constantly communicating with you over the radio. Again, the voice is the only reason that you stayed here after fixing your boat. It sounds like a completely brainy thing to do, but by the end of this video, it will make total sense. sense. The game itself looks repulsive, but in the best way possible. It's been crafted to look hostile, with tall concrete spires and rubble everywhere. There's a bloom setting you can turn on that makes you really appreciate any time you're outside, with daylight breaking through the clouds. Although it can definitely be a little overpowering sometimes, literally blocking text that you're trying to read.
I can't read that. What the fuck? The blue so.
Now, even though this is similar to Cry of Fear, you'll definitely notice a bit more jank this time around, like textures sticking out of place or enemies having broken pathfinding. There's even inescapable parts of the map, like this elevator shaft you can climb in that leads to absolutely nowhere, forcing you to reload a save. But this is forgivable because, you know, it's a Doom mod, and as well, made by one guy, not a team. Cry of Fear had Team Sidescalar, which was a fair few people, but this was one single person, and then some of his friends helping from time to time. Any shortcomings in this game are totally made up by the experience, because I have never played a game in my life where I've had more trust issues.
That is bait. That is bait. That's bait. Tom Hardy pointing upwards gift saying that's bait. Top text. Watch this.
By the way, if you're wondering why my mic was appalling, even though the game kind of came out in 2018, it does have that 2012 YouTube Let's Play vibe. So I set up my worst webcam possible and used that as a microphone. So sorry in advance. I think I'm allowed to be nostalgic about a game that has a sticky keys problem, okay? If that gets enabled during a game, it is old.
Oh shit. I enabled sticky keys on accident.
When you arrive on the island, you're completely unarmed apart from the radio you've been contacted on. And believe me, the first thing I tried to do was mash any button to get the hidden ending where you get back on the boat and leave, but that isn't an option. Shout out to games that do that, by the way. I mean, everyone knows about Far Cry 4, you know, you sit at the dinner table and skip the entire game. But I also remember this game called Shadow Complex where your girlfriend gets kidnapped, but you could just get back in the car and drive away.
Plenty of fish in the sea.
After leaving your boat, you get this brief walk on the beach that really shows how tall the structures are on Fort Oasis. Some views almost reminding me of the Citadel from Half-Life 2, something authoritarian, but kind of familiar. Finding a way inside, there's a door with a code on that we don't know, so we're forced the other way. And I just want to say, some of the effects they have in this mod are amazing. Like, look at this tarp flying around. It's obviously not freeform physics, and it's just an animation on repeat. I mean, if you hang around long enough, you can actually see it loop. But it's amazing to think that this is the same game that has the funny pink goblin. The intro chapter is one of the strongest. I mean, yeah, it does that thing that every horror game does before you get a weapon, you know, like hearing footsteps running across the halls. And random enemies flashing in and out of existence. But it's the way these are implemented which makes it special. You constantly feel uncomfortable and stalked, and that dread only builds when you find your first weapon, knowing by horror game logic, you'll have to use it on something. I love how horror games skew your perception so badly that getting a weapon is actually a bad thing now. You find a pickaxe on the floor, purposely in terrible condition. Unlike Cry of Fear, weapons here can break, forcing you to mix and match your playstyle and not overly rely on one weapon. I'm looking at you, Glock.
What do I think of it? I think it's a huge piece of shit.
Cry of Fear started you off with a knife, which you quickly replaced with a Glock, and because so many enemies drop Glock ammo, it was your workhorse for most of the game. Meanwhile, Total Chaos is a lot more melee combat based. Although there are guns you get later in the game. I mean, you know, this is an American mining colony. Did you really expect there to be no guns here?
Give me the blood, Lord! I've abandoned my cause!
Melee combat is broken into light and heavy attacks. You can see the stats of each weapon in the inventory. Light attacks can be chained into a 3-hit combo with each hit doing more damage than the last. And heavy attacks for two-handed weapons, where you charge up your stamina bar to release for maximum damage at the cost of being exhausted afterwards. The only thing you can't really do in this game is block. You can't outright block attacks because social distancing rules, so you'll have to quickly make some space before attacking again. The problem with 3-hit combos is you have to commit to deal any damage. And there's a chance you won't stun lock an enemy, so you'll end up trading hits, or taking about 5 years to kill anything, with hitting once, backing away, and repeat. Seriously, this takes ages. Please, never do this. Venturing more, we find a key and a note. Ironically, much like Doom, most of your progress is finding keys to unlock deeper parts of the island, or backtracking to a door that was locked before. The note reads, "They're gone. They're all gone. My paradise. Something has taken it over. This isolation, it is killing me."
Maidenless.
I mean, I kind of like this better than, you know, finding audio tape 385 of a guy going, "Oh God, help me, ah," and then cuts to static.
They're coming! Oh no! No!
Like, we get it. You played BioShock before you made your game. Move on. Overall, the inventory management is a lot more complex in Total Chaos than Cry of Fear. Cry of Fear, you had 6 inventory slots until you didn't. And in Total Chaos, it's more of a grid system, like Resident Evil. Although you have so many slots, you'll basically never reach your weight limit, but more your carry capacity. And even though the grid itself is huge, the problem is if you stack too many items, you'll hit your carry capacity very quickly. Once you reach overweight, which is marked by orange, your stamina regen will take a fat penalty. And then if you become over encumbered, which is purely red, you won't even be able to dodge, so you'll be a sitting duck. I would actually reach points in this game where I would drop medkits, knowing that they're completely useless, because if I couldn't dodge an attack, I'd have to end up using the medkit anyway. And also, exactly like Cry of Fear, opening your inventory mid-game doesn't pause anything, so you need to find somewhere safe and alone to organize stuff.
What is that? Shut up, I don't want to rip.
One problem I do have with the inventory is to consume something, you have to double tap it, but a single tap picks up the item so you can drag it somewhere else. So what you'll do in a blind panic is open your inventory, spam a healing item, only to realize you didn't heal at all because you spam mouse one so badly, the game doesn't know whether you want to heal or move the medkit, which usually always results in you dying straight away. Which ironically makes the situation even more stressful because you're working against the inventory. That being said, one thing I love about the inventory, there's never a point where the rug gets pulled up and you lose all your items. Cry of Fear did this in the last third of the game, and I was fine with it because, you know, it was to force a slower direction of gameplay, because at that point, the game threw like 8 guns at you and said, have fun. And obviously, to make the rest of the game a shooting gallery, it'd be boring. But my point is, any mistakes you make in the late game is because you didn't prepare for it. Shortly after, you're given a tutorial for the statuses in game, something Dark Souls would shamelessly steal 6 years prior.
Why am I toxic?
Health is self-explanatory. That bar goes empty, you're dead. You can heal with stim packs that cause slight bleeding and increase your hunger, or civilian medkits that are safer but weigh a ton. The 3 other statuses are radiation, hunger, and bleed. If radiation builds up, you'll start to take damage over time. This stat is kind of null until near the end of the game, where the radiation is so bad you've basically read a tweet that opens up with just your friendly reminder. The only real way you'll get radiation for most of the game is by eating irradiated food like moldy bread lying on the floor. You can sometimes find perfectly preserved foods like apples and bread, but it looks vaguely French, so eating the irradiated bread is always a better option.
Not great, not terrible.
This would be a problem, but radiation is incredibly easy to treat because apparently before the collapse, this place was a pharmacy. Because I've never seen more misplaced iodine tablets in my life that quickly remove all radiation, weigh nothing, and only slightly increase hunger. Now, hunger is the stat you'll actually have to keep track on. Your hunger will progress at a steady rate until about halfway, where it directly affects your stamina regen, like being over encumbered. Enemies sometimes drop food, even parts of themselves that you can consider food, but you'll find most of it in crates around Fort Oasis that you can break open. So it's a trade-off whether you want to sacrifice weapon durability or ammo to open crates for food, unless of course you found a weapon with infinite durability, but who knows if that's in the game. And finally, bleed. This is a stat that'll do progressive damage to you over time. If an enemy attacks you, there's a chance it'll also increase bleeding. The type of enemy also depends on how much bleed you'll get. Get punched or scratched? Probably not too much, but something sharper like a dog bite will give little damage but an insane amount of bleeding. I mean, these dogs probably aren't even native to the island, but bravely swam across the ocean to maul any child they came across. Bleeding can't kill you on its own, but it'll reduce you to 1 HP, so at that point, even a stray gust of wind will one-shot you. Now, you can lower the bleeding stat quicker by taking the blood clotters. The problem with them is, though, they increase your hunger a lot. So the best thing to take are bandages, but unfortunately, these are a lot more harder to come by. You can find them in the world or by making your own with a rag and some alcohol. Oh yeah, did I mention this game has crafting? That's something to get the Minecraft stands on board. I also really like, as soon as you close the menu, you see this body being dragged away. Like, they knew after you closed the menu, you'd still be taking a couple seconds to process that information, and using that to catch you off guard I love it. The first open area the game throws you in, you're forced to open 3 boxes and flip switches to open the door to escape. The key to unlock the boxes is on a foreman's desk next to a note which reads, "How many times do I have to tell you about door 237? Because of your stupidity, when we tried to open the gate, the entire blocks grid went offline again. Until you get the wiring fixed, we have to disable all couplings to open the door. You can't even do your job right. If this incompetence continues, you'll be asked to leave. I will not hand out another warning about this." After flipping the switch, your first enemy spawns, a brute, the most basic enemy in the game. Now, just because I called them basic doesn't mean they're weak. Brutes have 2 attack modes. One where they follow you slowly, trying to guess where you'll go next, and even throwing bottles or bricks at you like any UK pub past 10 PM.
That is so childish, man.
If you keep your distance for too long, they'll double their speed, making this horrible creaking sound, and they'll only leave this mode when they get close enough to hit you. I really wouldn't recommend trying to fight them in this mode, as soon as they get near you, they'll do a quick 1-2 combo that can only really be avoided if you dodge or can guarantee that your attack will be first and kill them. When you open the gate, you get taken to a deeper part of the complex where this happens. It's no use fighting back. You have to run, quickly pushing levers to open more roll-up doors as each dead end brings more enemies towards you. Cruelly, the game places enemies at the exit door, so you'll have to wait for enemies to come from both sides until you can weave past them to the exit. Even if you are clever enough to save your pickaxe's durability here, it'll quickly break before you can even get a confirmed kill. Making it through the final door, it thankfully shuts on its own, giving you a minute of reprieve. But not before you're contacted for the first time proper by the voice on the radio.
You have come here to find something. Something we have both desired for a long time. Your presence in this place means you are willing to do what I ask of you. If you follow my requests, then I will take you to what it is you desire.
It's unknown who the voice is and if you can even trust them, but they seem to have some control over the facility because they shut that gate behind you where the monsters were chasing you. But for now, you have no real choice apart from to follow their advice. This is the first time that they've properly been able to contact you because anything beforehand has been completely incomprehensible. One person I draw parallels to is the character Red from the Penumbra series. Penumbra was basically Amnesia before Amnesia. Red was a character that would contact you on radio throughout the game, give you advice, but you also got this feeling that he couldn't really be trusted, and a couple of times he did actually backstab you and lead you directly into enemies, only to then apologize, saying it was the funny voices in my head.
Those holes in my mind are increasingly gaping.
Going into the next room, you can find some clothing on the floor. Common rags worn by the locals of Fort Oasis, providing 20% damage protection. Better than nothing. Clothing or armor is an essential slot in your inventory, and you should know this by now, but the more protective the armor, the more it will impact your carry capacity. It'll degrade with each hit and can't be repaired.
$1,000 t-shirt pad.
But you can usually find exact copies around in the world. Leaving the tunnels to go outdoors again, we get another message from the voice on the radio.
We have been here before, during better times. Madness has intruded these walls. Only we can put a stop to it. On the north side of the island, a mine awaits us. Down there, at the deepest point, is where we need to go.
The voice on the radio wants us to go into the mines, the deepest point of Fort Oasis. One thing to note is how they talk to you like they know you personally and how you've been on the island before. This is something the intro directly referenced. The underhalls that leads to the greater area of Fort Oasis is locked, so we're forced to go back into electrical to progress. Inside, we find another letter, a doctor's note prescribing someone on the island Prozac to deal with panic attacks. Exploring the facility, you can find an optional vent that's pitch black, and I just want to say, don't be afraid to explore optional dark areas. It does look terrifying, and believe me, in my first playthrough, I did not want to go in there.
Ain't no way in hell I am going in there.
But this is where some of the best early game loot is. Like, for example, a wrench that deals next to no damage, but it's unbreakable, meaning it can be used to break open all the early game crates, giving you tons of food. And some normal pills that increase your max stamina, so you can jump around like a crackhead even more. Even though it is terrifying, it is 100% worth your time, even if you have a Markiplier moment trying to get out.
No. You're trolling. You're trolling.
I also have no idea what CSTM means. I look it up and just find an Xbox shoe. Finally, Xbox shoe. You can't cheese the game by turning up the brightness either. I did that because I'm a coward, but the textures themselves are pure black. So your best hope is to mash the action button until you find something, or hug walls until you find a light source. All items in the world do glow, so it's not 100% unfair. There are flares, but they're incredibly rare, and you should always collect and keep every single flare you find. Seriously? You will thank me later. Inside the canteen where the workers eat, we find another letter. Dr. Thomas, I'm not sure if this medication is proving to be effective. The symptoms are not going away. The brain shivers alone are becoming unbearable. Please, can I be prescribed something else? Would it be so bad if I went off this medication and stuck with therapy instead? Can you tell how much better my voice acting's got since I'm down the Freeman? This seems to be in direct correlation with the note prescribing Prozac. It could be possible that the workers in Fort Oasis found something deep in the mines that slowly drove them insane, mutating them into monsters. I mean, just down the hall, there's a monster that literally looks exactly like a Dead Space necromorph. Like, that is a necromorph. Totally not related, but I found this pretty funny. If you go to the bathroom behind the letter, your character does a yawn, like he's exhausted. This is triggered only by this hallway and never happens again, even though you do have a tired stat. I thought it was because I was hungry, but nope, it just happens no matter what the context, even if you're being chased by monsters. Shortly after is where we're taught our next tutorial on evading enemies. There's no sprinting in Total Chaos, but you can dodge in any direction like Cry of Fear. But here, you can do it to comedic lengths, where your character gets an Olympic gold for the long jump. Combined with the Doom engine having no fall damage, you can basically jump off a cliff with no drawback. Only real downside is you can do it about twice before running out of stamina. You know, I'm just going to say, I'm happy that dodging is mapped to the shift key, because they had a dodge mechanic in Cry of Fear and it was bound to like WSA and D. The amount of times I would accidentally kill myself jumping off a ledge because I meant to move slightly and I dodged.
What the fuck was that?
Enemies don't have to be killed and, if possible, should be avoided, because taking care of them will eat away at your weapon durability or precious ammo. And their item drop rates are somehow worse than the Silver Knights in Dark Souls 3. Remember that Covenant? I'm happy you never got to experience true pain. They'll usually drop an item that just wasn't worth your trouble. You'll never get something rare after finishing off a resident of Fort Oasis, usually just irradiated food, or my favorite, Monster Energy Zero Ultra. This is something even the voice warns you about.
There is no use in dispatching them. You might as well leave them there to fester.
Now, in Cry of Fear, if you go through any kind of door and come back without killing an enemy, they would have reset to their original spawn point. This doesn't happen in Total Chaos. Instead, no matter how many enemies you left behind, you'll hear them all trying to get through the door you just left. This is bad because when you try to go back, chances are you'll get stomped on in 3 seconds. But on the flip side, absolutely hilarious because this still runs on the Doom 2 engine. So if you were to go through a door with an enemy camping behind it, you'll telefrag them, killing them instantly. Just before getting the key to the underhalls, you're attacked by flying monsters emitting electricity. If you had a keen eye, you could have seen them before powering the generators above. Almost like the monsters are the ones keeping Fort Oasis alive. They quickly close the gap with a flying attack, but have fairly low HP where any mid-range attack puts them to bed instantly. Finally, entering the underhalls, we find a pair of scissors, a backup weapon in case your pickaxe breaks. You can't throw them like in, you know, certain video games. So overall, it's a fairly mid weapon. Did someone tell this guy that is not the way you should be running with scissors? Before the chapter ends, we can find a room that teaches us how to combine and repair items. Now, Cry of Fear had a few combinable items like Glock with flashlight and key in door. Oh yeah, as well, that they had a magazine in gun, but Total Chaos has a fairly deep crafting system. Let's say your melee weapon breaks. When this happens, you'll lose the weak wooden shaft, but you'll keep the metal head intact. So if you find some wood glue and then another wooden shaft, you can repair it into working condition. These are fairly common, but weigh a ton. So hoarding a whole IKEA shipment in your backpack is never a good idea. There are different types of heads and shafts, so you can mix and match. Shovels, pickaxes, fire axes, obviously something with a long shaft is going to support a bigger head, and therefore you can two-hand it and do way more damage than a single-handed weapon. But the downside is with a strong attack, obviously not being as quick as a short attack. There are loads of item combinations in this game, and if you investigate an item, chances are it will tell you what it can be combined with, so you don't have to experiment yourself. Many items can be combined, and the game will usually tell you what item can go with what, so you don't have to do it yourself. For example, like I said earlier, you can mix alcohol and a rag to make sterilized bandages. Funnily enough, you actually can't make a Molotov in the game with alcohol, because apparently none of the alcohol on Fort Oasis is 100 proof. You can drink the alcohol instead of turning it into bandages, but it's totally useless. It barely reduces your hunger. Next to the supplies is another note. T, glad you were able to return the contract to us. How would you like to start next week? We have a lot of backed up work we need to get on top of. Last year was hectic, but 86 is looking to be worse. Glad to have you on board. A seemingly normal letter wrote before Fort Oasis was abandoned. It's great little details like this that remind you that Fort Oasis was a real lived-in place with people and at some point was normal. Going through another door, we enter... Now, the game has taught us all the basics, so this chapter lets you loose and fully embraces exploration and backtracking, but not before teaching you about the most important mechanic in the entire game: throwables. You can find rocks or bricks to pick up and throw. Other games have this too. You throw a rock, enemy investigates, you sneak away. But there's no stealth system in Total Chaos. When enemies notice you, a distinct audio cue will play when you're spotted. Much like Doom, enemies are usually placed in areas where they see you first. I've played this game like 4 times now, and only once did I actually get the drop on a monster, because the devs forgot to make him face the right way. Poor soul. May he rest in peace. Rocks, bricks, and bottles can be thrown to enemies and are insanely overpowered. Honestly, who needs a gun when you have the biceps of a man that jerks off 25 times a day? Bricks and bottles will break on impact, usually putting anything to bed instantly. And rocks deal less damage but have infinite durability. So you can just pick one up, throw it at an enemy, pick it back up again, and just rinse and repeat until they're dead. The Virgin Pickaxe and the Chad Pebble. Throwables can also be used to hit unreachable levers, unlocking areas you never could. I mean, you could easily fit through that gap, but, you know, this is the Doom 2 engine, so give a bit of credit. Come on, guy. The underhalls are a labyrinth. You can find a map, but honestly, I never really relied on them too much. There's no landmarks or anything visible to differentiate the place. Plus, I'm lazy. If there's no cursor to show where I am on the map, chances are I'm just gonna hug every wall until something happens. I like as well, near the entrance, they put a shotgun in plain view, but out of reach behind a locked door. And a door right next to it is open from the other side. The game is already teaching you that backtracking is a big thing. As by the end, chapters usually end up being a huge sprawl. One thing I love is how they put the shotgun away from the opening, because in this game, if you see an item through an opening, you can actually grab it, you know, like in real life, instead of having to go all the way around to pick an item up. Please, video games, normalize this. I can put my hands through the bar. A little bit ahead, you find a locked door to the surface, where you see flashes of what appears to be people before the voice on the radio contacts you again.
They will attempt to enter our progress. The forgotten ones. They do not belong in this place. Near the graveyard, there is a storage room. It should be a key to bypass this door.
It's interesting to note how the voice says the Forgotten Ones aren't meant to be here, as opposed to, you know, the literal zombies walking all over the place. Breaking a pallet, you find a message saying, "Remember the can't." Now, I thought this was some hidden, deeper meaning, but nope. Apparently, it's a reference to the Expanse TV show.
Remember the cat.
I have never watched it, But there's a guy with a fedora in it, so yeah, probably not gonna watch that now. This is also the part of the game where you start to see human corpses, possibly the people that used to live on Fort Oasis. Although now their bodies barely resemble anything human. The low poly textures really add to how horrific these bodies look. Next to one, you can find a broken knife. Knives are a bit harder to repair as wood glue doesn't do the job. You'll need a knife repair kit box, and these are incredibly rare, with only a few being in the entire game. The knife can only do quick attacks, but it pretty much guarantees a stun lock every time you hit an enemy. A cheaper alternative would be to make a shiv from scrap metal and duct tape, the most popular tool for communicating with someone in Great Britain.
I don't much like the tone of your voice.
But you should really only do this if you've got no weapon to rely on or spare parts to fix one, because the damage is not very good. Next to the game's first scrap metal pickup, you can find another note. Mr. Scott, as you requested from last week's visit, I followed up on treatment options. The community at Fort Oasis is still young, so unfortunately, we don't have the required equipment here. Most patients we get with similar conditions are usually referred to go back to the mainland for treatment. I understand that you have a preference to stay, but sadly, this is all I can recommend. Kind regards, Thomas Clark, FO Medical. The letter is someone talking about wanting treatment for an unknown illness, but Fort Oasis doesn't have the technology to treat it. I mean, maybe this could be the reason for the fort changing. Maybe this person had some kind of unknown pathogen or illness that went around infecting everyone. Deeper in the underhalls, the environment slowly changes. There are less enemies, but loads of bodies and webbing covering the walls. And the atmospheric sounds are replaced with crying and wailing. You can find another note, a map this time displaying a red circle marked as a hole surrounded by red X's with white lines showing where you need to go. And it doesn't take long for you to find out what those red X's represent. You've landed right in the spider's nest, or as the game calls them, long legs. The walls looking more fleshy now. Thankfully they're docile for now, but if you get too close, they will wake up. Now, the game gives you a choice here. You can sneak out without alerting any and continue through the level. But wait, you see that shiny switch in the corner, purposely under a bright light so it stands out? You want to press that lever, don't you? You want that dopamine hit like when you race someone on Twitter. The game knows you're going to try and flick it. And if you do, this happens. Unsurprisingly, this absolutely terrified me the first time I flipped the switch. Spiders are another common enemy in the game. You can see at one point they were human, but their limbs have been horribly disfigured. They have two stages like a brute, one where they slowly crawl towards you, but another where they sprint, which looks terrifying, by the way. The main trick up their sleeve is being able to spit at you. This is painfully effective, as you'll be stuck in place, usually meaning they can close the gap and get a couple hits on you. If that wasn't bad enough, the spit is actually acidic, so it does damage to you and gives you high bleeding. So your best strat is to break line of sight so they can't tomahawk you across the map. The only upside is they're more fragile than most enemies, usually being killed in one fully charged attack. Exploring more in the spider's lair, you can find a pallet covering an opening. And ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you the #1 in Slavic cuisine, the mobile gas cooker. Take any piece of food you find in the world and make it slightly more edible. With this amazing little tool, you can turn meat sludge into cooked meat sludge, which is so much more filling and removes all radiation. I actually haven't tried Spam. I like how they have this as some kind of award, by the way. It says 90% meat, as in the meat product is 90% meat, like they get some kind of Nobel Peace Prize. I'll try Spam for the first time. See the consistency there? Just looks like a liver. Cheers. I mean, it's not terrible. There's definitely a bit of raccoon in there, though.
Such a comforting smell, flavor. It's delicious.
Okay. This is gonna kill me if I keep eating it. But I haven't eaten today. Like, for example, turning rotten, moldy, irradiated bread into just rotten, moldy bread. Wow. the technology of today. Why not also try turning salami into hot salami? You can even kill brutes and cook their rotting remains into a much healthier source of nutrition. I just like how heating any food instantly removes all the radiation from it. The best nutrition in the game are army rations, and if you heat those, they'll fully restore your stamina and hunger no matter how down bad you are. Surprisingly, the game doesn't let you cook energy drinks. Not sure why. Must be an American thing. The only problem is the gas cooker weighs around 20 pounds, so carrying it around with you is next to impossible unless you want a fat stamina penalty. Best option, drop the gas cooker in an area you know you'll backtrack and use it as a save point so you can cook anything you can find because it'll never lose its buff. I like as well, you can see this whole backdrop I've got here, right, that I spent ages setting up. I tried to get a gas cooker that was similar to the one in Total Chaos. Just this little baby thing. It's adorable. Just before you leave the spider's nest, the game baits you with this cache of items. Oh my. If only I could get in there. I could simply never fit through this 4-foot wide opening. Well, remember that switch you flicked in the middle of the nest? That actually opened a roll-up door, so you'll have to go all the way back into the nest a second time. Doing so gives you a ton of valuable items, like a scientific med kit that heals more than a regular med kit, stops any kind of bleeding, and gives you a free month of Reddit gold. And also a vial of MK2, an experimental compound. There's a few different compounds in the game, and like any drug addict, you're gonna blindly take them and stick them into your arm without knowing any of the side effects. You'll need a clean, empty syringe. You can find these lying around on the floor. Surprisingly, stim packs don't give empty syringes. I assume after using them, you eat the metal for the iron content. MK2 is a miracle drug that cures any status effects, refills health, hunger, and stamina with no apparent drawbacks. Yeah, I'm sure that description was wrote by a guy I saw in London last week. Inside the room are the game's 2 consumable tablets. A red haste steroid that massively decreases your strong attack charge up for 2 minutes, meaning you can quickly chain heavy hits when overcrowded. And an orange HB steroid that stops hunger for 5 minutes. Now, this pill is disgustingly overpowered. It cleans your hunger bar entirely, but anything you do afterwards that would increase hunger just doesn't, meaning you can spam heal stim packs that usually leave you famished, but there's now no drawback. You can even decrease your radiation with iodine tablets, use blood clotters to stop bleeding, and your hunger won't go up at all. I remember not taking the red tablets too much, but I'd instantly eat any orange steroid I found. For once in my career, I approve of the use of steroids in a video game.
It gets bigger when I pull them.
You can also find traditional steroids and adrenaline as well that increase your stamina and health, but honestly, I never use these. As long as you keep your hunger down, there's not much of a point. The most important thing in the cache is the key to the armory, where the shotgun was at the beginning of the chapter. The shotgun, by the way, is amazing. I'd say it's your workhorse, but honestly, no gun is, because ammo is so scarce. You really should treat guns as a way to get out of an unwinnable situation. It can hold 4 rounds, but usually 1 is enough to kill most enemies. Also, the sound design and animations for it... God. Guns can't be broken in Total Chaos. They have infinite durability. I didn't even know this until like my 3rd playthrough, but the shotgun actually doubles up as a melee weapon because you can use the butt of it. The reason why I didn't know this is because no other gun in the game has a melee function. It's only the shotgun. The attack power is, to be honest, pathetic, but it's great to open crates for items if you don't want to sacrifice the durability of your melee weapons. Guns don't have crosshairs and you can't iron sight, but precision aiming is never really a thing in this game. A body shot does the same damage as a headshot, so if you aim in someone's general direction, you'll pretty much always hit. You can also find the rest of the game's compounds in the armory. GR72K, which greatly reduces hunger in the user, essentially wiping out the hunger bar. Still not as good as the pill form, which stops hunger for 5 minutes though. MK1, which essentially becomes a morphine injection, basically a health kit and inferior version of MK2, the miracle drug I mentioned earlier. Compound SK423, which turns into a stamina K injection, giving you a huge stamina boost, the equivalent of chugging 3 Monster Energy Zero Ultras. Honestly, I never really used any of these injections, despite keeping them on me for the whole game thinking I'd need them. If you keep well fed and stop bleeding with bandages, you won't need them. The game has stim packs pretty much everywhere, so you'll never be out of health if you don't play too recklessly. Just before getting outside, you're contacted again on the radio.
This place, it was a paradise. They are all gone now. It will never be the same again.
It sounds like whoever the voice is, they've been living on the island for a while. Whether an employee, resident, or traveler isn't known, but they seem almost defeated with the state that the island has reached, saying that their paradise has been taken away from them. Why they've chosen to stay is completely unknown, maybe to warn people like ourselves, or maybe they never had a chance to escape the island, hence why you're there to rescue them. After being contacted, you find another note on the table. TJ Scott, November 2nd, 1984. I assumed originally it's February because Americans are morons and they like swap the day and the month for some reason. Bizarre. But the guy that made the mod was a Kiwi, so I'm just gonna go by the typical, you know, day, month, year. The thing the rest of the world does. It is a shame to have you leave us. The community of Fort Oasis would not be the same without your contribution. I understand you must leave due to health issues. I am also sorry to hear about Lida leaving. We agree, it is very strange. If we hear anything from her or she returns, we will inform her of your situation as it develops. We hope you return as soon as you're well enough. Kind regards, Alistair Orwell, Mayor of Fort Oasis. Whoever TJ is, this letter seems to be in direct correlation with the other letter talking about how they didn't have the medical equipment to treat an illness. This seems to be already after his resignation and he's gone back to the mainland for treatment. Finally getting outside again, and for a game running on Doom 2, it's just amazing. The bloom from the sky really adds to the atmosphere there. Even though you're isolated and alone, you have a couple of minutes to gather your thoughts. This is where the game introduces you to your first dog enemy. Incredibly easy to dispatch, but if you let them get a hit on you first, their range is insane, so you'll be so disorientated that you won't be able to fight back until it's too late. The entire reason you're out here is to get a key to unlock surface access so you can leave the Underhalls entirely. It's right past this roll-up door, but instead, if you go down to the cemetery, the voice on the radio contacts you.
There is nothing to find down there. Head to the storage room.
You go down to the cemetery regardless, and if anything, it seems the voice was lying to you. There's loot everywhere. Maybe it's not a way to progress to the mines, but at least it's supplies to stock up on. But then you realize you're not alone out here. There's something in the cemetery with you, but you can't actually see it. The only way you'll know where it is by its sounds becoming louder and when you take damage from it. On purpose, you can never tell exactly where the noise is coming from, but only its general direction. I actually went back through this footage and found that it reveals itself for about 2 frames, but the sounds and visuals are so disorientating, there's no way you could use this to find out exactly where it is. Melee isn't really an option as you take damage whenever you're near it, so the best thing to do is use your trusty shotgun. Once it's dead, you're free to loot the area with no distractions. Only problem you'll have now is, again, your carry weight.
Lose the weight, bitch!
Alright, I want to complain about this for a second, alright? Overall, I think it's an amazing system and very well implemented. If you could carry everything you find in the game, you'd be an unstoppable force by like chapter 2, and the rest of the game would be a cakewalk. You need some kind of hindrance there. But the weight values on items make no sense. The big stuff like wrenches and axes, that's completely fine. I don't have a problem with that. It's the smaller stuff. I understand smaller stuff like blood clotting tablets and cigarettes not having any weight, but hundreds of bullets weighs less than a single tablet. You can find your second gun in the game in the cemetery, the P08 pistol. The damage is alright. I mean, honestly, I'm not too fond of this gun. More because the magazines for it are incredibly heavy, weighing a couple pounds each. And for how rare the ammo is, the gun really doesn't do that much damage. But again, if you're cornered and about to die, it's a great get out of jail free card. The P08 is based on the German Luger. The one thing you'll notice is how all the guns in Total Chaos are very dated, most of them originating from the early 1900s. The shotgun looks similar to a Remington 870, which came out in the 50s, and Total Chaos is set in 1972.
My mission is to kill Chaos. That's all I know.
In case you're wondering, you don't actually lose the spare bullets in the mag like reloading in Cry of Fear, but the trade-off is ammo in Cry of Fear was pretty plentiful after the first act, but here it's sprinkled much less frequently. Going back inside and getting the blue block key, you can finally get to surface access. When the door opens, you find another note on the floor, this one placed almost like you were meant to pick it up. Leader, why are you leaving? You didn't say anything was wrong. Everything was going perfectly. You can't just pack up and leave me here without any explanation. I feel after everything we've been through, this is a stab in the back. I love you. Does that not mean anything? Why can't I be normal? Fucking useless. Can't keep. The letter ends there. What seems to be a genuine letter of reasoning devolves into self-hatred and ramblings. We have no idea who wrote this note, but it was obviously meant to be shown to the person's friend or even partner. Before getting to the surface, there's rubble blocking the way. Yep, I know if we were playing any other game, you could crouch jump over that, but I'm trying to make the game interesting. With no other way to go, we have to do a slight detour where we face one of the biggest challenges yet. Every other monster we've seen in this game has made a straight beeline towards you, but this one is different. Almost watching you. Most of you are going to say it's SCP-173, and yeah, it is, alright? It literally is SCP-173. Only in this game, you never actually blink, and instead of breaking your neck, it does this. It'll move whenever you don't have direct eye contact on it, so you can hear it move towards you, only to stop at a corner. Its health pool is almost near invincible. I've tried emptying everything I have into one, and it's done literally nothing. It's basically a landmine that follows you around, so keeping eye contact on it isn't enough. You'll also have to make sure that it isn't camping your way out, and sometimes you'll have to let it get closer just to shimmy around it so it doesn't explode. It's a dicey game, made perfect by that horrible barefoot running sound whenever you lose sight of it. The only real benefit is being able to open your inventory, because technically you're still maintaining eye contact.
I'm gonna cook juicy spam in front of you and you can't do shit. That must really hurt, man. That must really hurt that you can't do shit while I'm cooking this juicy spam.
Now, don't tell anyone I told you this, but there's a very high risk, high reward strategy here. Yes, the explosion radius is like a small nuke, but if you manage to get behind something physical as soon as it detonates, you'll take absolutely no damage. The only problem is setting up a position where you can simultaneously set the monster off and then hide behind something in about half a second. Getting the key, backtracking and escaping, the voice on the radio has something very strange to say.
Leader, there is nothing to be said about her. As soon as we reach the mines, none of this will matter.
Now, that's interesting because Leader is the same name on the letter that we found on the floor just before going into this room. The letter talking about someone named Leader apparently abandoning someone else. I mean, maybe some of the letters we've been finding have actually been wrote by the voice on the radio. Maybe at one point, Leader was his wife. I mean, if you look at the body of the monster, it looks feminine enough.
Mommy milkers!
The voice sounds dismissive talking about her, but the letter we read speaks volumes more. One thing to know, I only actually captured that audio on my live stream because every subsequent playthrough going through that area, I managed to like bait the monster into exploding. So it seems that if you kill Leader, then the voice on the radio just doesn't want to talk about it. Getting in the elevator, obviously used to transport workers that used to live here, we move on to chapter 3. That isolation I assume the voice has from the letter is pretty much confirmed as soon as you get out the elevator.
I've been isolated in this place. It has been suffocating.
It makes a lot more sense that the voice has been the one leaving messages for people, including graffiti on the walls with one message saying, "Jealousy is suffocating." Up ahead is this chapter's new enemy, the Splitter.
Oh my god! What is that?
A horribly contorted creature that once resembled a human, but now has had its entire upper body separated to become one giant mouth. The first thing that comes to mind is a creature from John Carpenter's The Thing. It's fairly slow compared to a brute, but it is way more tanky. And if it manages to get you with its mouth, it's a slow wind-up, but instant kill no matter what your health. Past the monster, we find another blood-soaked letter. I will reach out again, because it does not feel right having you absent on the list. We sent you an invitation for Alice and I's anniversary party over 5 weeks ago, and we have not heard back about an RSVP. Is everything okay? For those who don't know, by the way, RSVP is an abbreviation of respond if you please. I understand that you're going through a lot right now. If you let us know that is the reason, we can understand that. But the radio silence has us worried. Your old friend, Ryan. Again, this is another letter of someone voicing their frustration, but leader is nowhere to be mentioned. We're not even sure who this letter is directed at, but whoever it was, they were ghosting Ryan. I mean, possibly this could be the voice on the radio isolating and cutting themselves away from everyone, and in turn, it saved their life because they're the only person left alive on the island now. Getting outside, you can see the real decay and neglect Fort Oasis has suffered. It's refreshing to be outside for the majority of the chapter, but you can tell how long things have been in bad shape here, looking more like a prison island than somewhere you'd actively choose to live on. You can see some remnants of the old life with bombed out shops and bars, but it pales to how the island is now, with billboards once having advertisements, now simply saying, get help. Before going into the town, there's another letter. Tyler, I appreciate that you want to reconnect after moving back to the mainland. I am so sorry to hear about your illness. I feel terrible for keeping this a secret for so long, but trying to get a hold of you since you left Fort Oasis was almost impossible. We have a child. She is beautiful. Her name is Cora. Please keep in touch. Write back to me. Leader. Now, this letter is the most confusing. It's the first letter wrote from Leader, which should kind of give context, but it throws every previous theory off. We don't know who Tyler is. I mean, it must be the same person because Leader also talks in this letter that they had to leave the island because they were critically ill. TJ Scott is a name referred to in a couple of the letters we found, so we can assume that TJ Scott and Tyler Scott are the same person. But again, that begs the question, why would they leave the island to get treatment only to then come back? Shortly after the letter, you can find a harpoon gun, and honestly, this is downright the worst ranged weapon in the game. Firstly, it weighs a metric ton, which usually means it has to be godlike to be worth keeping around.
What is this? What the fuck is it? What the fuck is that?
They are reusable, meaning you can pick them up after firing at an enemy, but there's a high chance the spear will just disappear as soon as it touches anything. Plus, the weight of each spear is the same as a small pickaxe, meaning you'll have to fully commit to this weapon, and if you run out of harpoons, I guess you're back to rocks. There's some more around him, I think. Now, this would be the shortest chapter in the entire game, being about 3 minutes, but your route out is blocked.
With what festers in there, we will need a weapon more conventional to pass. Nearby is an offshore prison containing an armory. In there, you will find a firearm. We need this to proceed.
This chapter relies on creating shortcuts by opening one-way doors to get back to this location with the equipment you need. I like as well the voice mentions a conventional weapon, almost roasting how garbage the harpoon gun is. If the lore is telling you the gun sucks,
oh my god,
you need to get rid of it.
That's the what a
I do just have to reiterate again, this chapter is beautiful. The low grass blowing in the wind itself from the sea creating this eerie sound that plays over the soundtrack. You're outside now, but you don't feel any safer. I love how the developer put you outside for a chapter with the risk of not being as anxious, but nailed it with this totally different atmosphere. This chapter reminds me the most of Cry of Fear's Stockholm, because this place does look lived in at one point, even though the population here is probably 2,000 compared to Stockholm's 900,000. I didn't even notice this until now, but indoors, the lights actually swing. Again, no idea what kind of black magic they did. This is Doom 2. This chapter also knows you're starting to get comfortable with the game, so it throws a lot more traps at you. Unfortunately for these enemies, I come from the knife capital of the world, so they didn't stand a chance. I love this one scare in particular where you can hear a girl crying. You go to investigate only to find a treasure trove of medkits, but when you go to actually collect them, this happens. I know I already showed my reaction to this at the start of the video, but I love it, and it is one of the main reasons I made this video. You've always treated doors as a safe space, a way to quickly escape enemies from behind. There's not even a door animation for a solid door, just a fade to black like Cry of Fear. But weaponizing the door against you, taking that trust away, is such a cruel thing to do, but I love it. This isn't the only instance either. There's a few other doors that attack you throughout the game, but they're so spaced out, they'll surprise you as soon as you forget about it being a thing. And yes, if you're wondering, you can't kill the door. Believe me, I've tried. Getting to the security checkpoint before the armory, we're greeted again by that fleshy growth and wailing we saw in the underhalls. I like how each enemy almost has its own environment and calling card, giving you a bit of a warning before you have to fight them. There's a lever inside the security room. If we throw something at it, we can unlock the door, rewarding us with 2 new items: police armor and a small explosive resembling a pipe bomb. The police armor, much like the